Everybody, welcome to the August 20th, 2014 board meeting of the Lake City Development Corporation. Let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And Brad, since you were last to get here, you get
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have first opportunity for any public comment. Anyone would like to address the board at this point? We have a few people in the audience. Unless you're on the agenda already. If you're not on the agenda, you're welcome to come and address us. Welcome, and if you want to have a seat there so we can catch you on mic.
And I can talk for a long time.
Yeah, you can talk for a while. If you could give us your name and maybe
Sure.
address.
My name's Chet Gady. I live in Mill River, and I'm the president of the Mill River Property Owners Association. And I understand that you are considering helping fund the purchase of the railroad right-of-way, which goes through Mill River and then through unincorporated portions and then to Riverstone. I applaud that, and I applaud all of your efforts. I'm most excited about the unincorporated part, quite frankly. But the part in Mill River, as the president of the association, I can't tell you what the residents will want to do with that. So I'm asking you to make sure that whatever happens with that we do have some sort of public process. What would guess would happen to that property is it would be melded somehow into Johnson Park. It would be given to the city for city control, and that makes a lot of sense to me. However, the other day I was walking around Johnson Park and I was talking to one of the maintenance guys from the city, and he said, yep, last year we had 3 guys, this year we have only 2. And it occurred to me that if we expand that park, we're going to need more people there, and if you give that to the city and there is no operation dollars that go with that, it might cause some sort of difficulty. So I would ask you to look at exploring ways that maybe operation dollars could not only capital investment and construction dollars, but operation and maintenance dollars go with that property. I'm a taxpayer in Mill River, and my taxes go to you, so my taxes won't go to operating that park. So as you make that thought, first thing is, yes, do it. Second thing is we get down into the nuts and bolts. Please think about, if you give it to the city, it's a good gift. If you give it to the city with some maintenance dollars, it's a better gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Chet. I'll tell you, too, we're going to have an opportunity for budget testimony here. A couple of items down the agenda, and the acquisition dollars for that right-of-way will be on there. So if you want to speak again, you're welcome to.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing nobody else, how about approval of our July 16th board meeting minutes?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moving second, are there any questions, comments, or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. CDA 2030 initiative update and funding request. Dr. Buck, welcome. And if you could remind our audience at home who you are and who you work with, that would be good.
Sure, thank you. I'm Charles Buck. I'm here representing the Coeur d'Alene 2030 Vision Project. I also work at the University of Idaho here in Coeur d'Alene. Thank you for the chance to join you all today, and thank you all for your tireless volunteer service. I'm not sure if the jar of peanuts is tongue-in-cheek or what, but I've heard you guys work for peanuts. So we really appreciate your service, though, and it's a real pleasure for me to come before you to talk about the Vision Project and looking forward into the future. As you know, I'm sure, we have been working with the community for the last 14 months now to create a vision for our community for 2030. So this is what our friends, neighbors, and fellow citizens are saying they want the city to look like in 2030. And we have gone through a series of steps now to consolidate vast amounts of community input from around 2,000 community residents to articulate specific action items that can then guide the project moving forward and help us to enable that future that we've envisioned. So I passed around a brief summary of the structure for the project, and in particular wanted to just kind of quickly walk you through some of the basic accomplishments that we've achieved in the first year, and I think to really focus on where we are now and moving forward in the context of our request for support from LCDC to help us move the project along. So we'll just briefly touch on the past because we're all interested in the future here. But I mentioned already the data gathering component. In addition to reaching out informally to citizens at various events across the community, I note that it's Fair Week. We had a booth at the fair last week and staffed it with last year and staffed it with volunteers all week to ask our fellow citizens there, what do you want Coeur d'Alene 2030 to be? And they filled out forms, they answered the question. All that's been incorporated into our data collection. We've also done 2 scientific surveys to both identify the needs and gaps in the community and recommendations for actions for our community moving forward. And then in a second scientific survey to vet some of those key action items and get the community's input again on are these the items that are important and to help us prioritize which actions should be higher priority and others that may be lower. All of that data has been compiled and we're making it available freely and openly to anyone in the public. It's on our website. And I think in both the raw and in various process forms that we've achieved, this data is really going to be an important asset for policymakers, for businesses and the like in the years to come. We'll continue to gather data and we'll continue to make that available to the public. We have also used that information to articulate the specific and overarching vision for the community for 2030. As well as a specific vision in each of 6 target areas, and I'll refer to a couple of these as we go along. But these topic areas include education and learning, growth and development, jobs in the economy, et cetera, and are really just an effort to structure the data collection and the visioning process around key themes that are important to our community. Environment and recreation is another, for example. So that vision booklet has now been published and been available for going on 2 months now. We rolled that out with our end of year 1 celebration. Have a very nice, I meant to bring you copies. Did you happen to bring some? Yeah, Nicole will bring some copies up. A very nice illustration of the work that's been done and an opportunity for all of you, for our businesses, our city government, our county, et cetera, to demonstrate our commitment to the future and our vision for the future of the community. I think that's a very strong statement that we can provide both to internally for all of us to understand, yeah, this is something our community feels is important, and also when we entertain visitors here, maybe Steve Griffiths is recruiting a company, to hand that CEO a copy of this vision and say, we're thinking about the future. We're interested in making our city a better place in the future. I think is quite powerful. So we have many of these printed and are distributing them. They're also available to download on our website. And this was one of the key deliverables that we described at the beginning of the project and was delivered on time as part of the year 1 process. Then just the last point about kind of from where we've come is the action items, the implementation plan that I referred to before. So from all of this community data, we have worked with a large community committee to consolidate the information and vision of our community into 178 action items that have been described and articulated in this implementation plan. And I'll just pass this first version around. This is the first copy. We've just gone to press with this, and it'll be available within about a week or 2 now for everyone, and also be available on the website. What you'll see if you just leaf through here is that, again, we've utilized these topic areas and articulated action items in each of several strategies that underlie each of the topic areas. And all of these are aimed at achieving the vision of the community in very specific projects. In addition to articulating those actions, we've worked closely with groups across the community to identify lead partners and supporting partners that have agreed to take responsibility for those actions moving forward and to help the community work towards achieving those actions. So that combination of a specific action and an identified lead partner is really part of the secret sauce, we think, to enabling the success of a visioning project and to keep the project active and vital and not sitting on a shelf and forgotten in a couple of years. So this implementation plan is another of the key deliverables that have been driving our project from the beginning. We, as I said, this will be available in the next week or two, and while this was promised in we had a complete draft by the end of the first year, but have been working on the layout and design, and so its release has just been a little bit delayed. But I'm happy to show it around to you, and we'll make copies available to you as they come out. Like I said, it'll also be available for download on the website. So now I thought it would make sense to shift gears and to talk about the structure and priorities for the Vision Project moving forward. We have been operating almost exclusively as a volunteer group, something you're all familiar with, and that will continue. This is all about engaging the community and enabling and empowering volunteers to achieve their vision. We will need to create a structure for the project moving forward in order to promote its sustainability and to enable the implementation that I've just described for you. So we've laid out in this structure document that I handed out really 3 priorities for the project in year 2. And those are, broadly speaking, are implementation of the vision, sustainability for the Vision Project, and then public relations and communications. We've touched a lot of folks in the community. We know we haven't touched them all, and we're going to continue to need to communicate and to effectively relate what's going on and why with respect to the Vision Project moving forward. Part of our activity for this Phase 2, Year 2, is to incorporate the Vision Project as a entity in Idaho and a 501c3 entity to enable us to be competitive for various grants that we will be applying for and that will enable us to achieve some sustainability with respect to budget. We intend to keep the project staff to a minimum. We've really just proposed to include a single manager, project manager, like we've had this year in Nicole Kaler, whom I think all of you have met. And one of the key aspects we think moving forward with the implementation plan is to be at the ready as an entity to provide needed project management, essentially, to help these lead and supporting partners who are all on volunteer basis organize, get information that they need, and successfully move forward with implementation and with achieving that, that particular action item. So that's the principal sort of implementation role that we see for the team moving forward. And then the other 2 components will be to continue to communicate more and more effectively with the community and to provide for sustainability for the Vision project moving forward so that we can keep this rolling through to 2030. We have already experienced some pretty remarkable response to the Vision project. There are a number of actions that are underway now, have actively engaged volunteer teams in the community and are moving forward at a rapid rate. I'm speculating that we'll be to 2030 by 2020 in this community, which is really heartening and encouraging, and we're welcoming the chance to update this plan on an annual basis. But you know, as we've reached these goals early, we'll be articulating a next set of goals, again, based on community input. In the implementation plan, you'll find a number of actions that are relevant and will be of interest for Lcdc. I'm sure many of you have heard of some of these before as we've been working on gathering this data and articulating the actions. Just a couple to note in particular, if you happen to have the book on page 34, you'll see in the growth and development area that there's a recommendation to create a master plan for East Sherman District. This is something that many of us have discussed, and that is evidence that our community is interested in this, wants to see it happen, and obviously this would be something that urban renewal might become interested in, for example. Another example is the call for a comprehensive plan for community infrastructure. This is for further development, also for technology infrastructure. What do we have? What do we need? Where are we going to need to be in 5 years and 10 years in that space? And how can we get there? Another example of an action plan that would certainly be including input and your influence. And then finally, on page 51, you'll find an action item to support innovation and entrepreneurial activity in the community. This can be both large and in very specific ways, like, for example, the emerging efforts of the Innovation Collective here and the notion of bringing together the creative and innovative components of our community in a physical place where ideas can be exchanged and where that kind of magic can happen that can really move us to move our economy into more high-tech jobs, more high-growth companies, et cetera. Again, this is potentially an area where LCDC would be a major player. So, as I've mentioned, we have identified a structure for the organization moving forward and are now looking to an opportunity, particularly for this phase two, essentially for year two, to establish the project as a legal entity so that we can create a sustainability plan moving forward, so that we have continuity with the implementation that's already begun, and to help get all the lead and supporting partners going on their action items over this next year, and to continue to communicate and update our community on the status and excitement that the Vision Project is bringing. I've included in the handout just a pro forma budget for our second year of activity, and just tried to kind of isolate in on three line items there that would, for example, constitute our request to LCDC. We're asking for funding at the level of $25,000 for year two, and have included here our visioning project consultant activity. Stephen Ames out of Bend, Oregon has been our consultant, and we anticipate engaging him for the project moving into the second year. Additional assistance in the marketing and communications area at $5,000, and then $2,000 for marketing for the project during this budget year, to total $25,000. We are engaging with a number of other organizations to assist with support for the project in the coming year. This includes the City of Coeur d'Alene, as you'll see going through the implementation plan. Very many of the actions are, the city is the lead partner. It's probably not surprising. This is a vision for Greater Coeur d'Alene in 2030. The city has been very supportive and has indicated their support for the project moving forward. We have this year and been supported by a number of the large businesses and organizations in the community, both large and small, and we will return to them to ask for their support for year two. These include organizations that I'm sure are familiar to all of you: Kootenai Health, Vista, many of the smaller businesses and organizations in the community have also contributed, and we're formulating now the need and requirement and the ask that will go forward in terms of generating the rest of the budget that you see in front of you here. We've got a good start on it. As I said, the city's been very accommodating and very supportive of the project, but we recognize that we'll need to do some fundraising with our community partners to achieve this budget. Among the other donors that we've benefited from include the Coeur d'Alene Realtors Association, local contractors, for example. A number of our local growing tech businesses have supported the project thus far, as has Hecla Mining, for example. And I know you'll all be floored to learn that the higher education institutions have actually put money on the table to support the project. So, there's a lot of enthusiasm around the project. I think our success, really led by Nicole as the project manager, our progress has been very good this year. The project has been well received. We've done what we set out to do. Now the goal is to move this forward to implementation and really to see the community take this implementation plan on. So with that, I'll invite any of your questions, either for me or others on the project management team who are all here. Nicole is here, Steve Wilson from the Chamber, and Mike Ridley from the city, and I have served on the project management team. So thanks for the chance to talk at you.
Very good. Any questions for Charles or others?
Just one.
Justin.
So first, I think I want to just kind of commend the group for what's going on here, because I think it's great to get that much community input going into what we're really going to create here in Coeur d'Alene for years to come. I think for the public's knowledge base, it would be good if you could just give us a little bit of description, Charles, on we supported the project through last year. There's an ask again for this year. What do you anticipate for ongoing funding from this point forward as far as the visioning project from Lcdc? Just to give the group maybe a little bit more thought on that.
And you're asking specifically in years 3 to 16, for example.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, so it's difficult to be specific on that front. Really, we tried to focus in year one on those key deliverables and really had a very finite view of the organization of the Vision Project for that year. We wanted to keep it very tight and very focused on establishing these deliverables. And so perhaps ill-advisedly, we didn't spend a lot of time focusing on, okay, so what's going to happen in year two in terms of the structure of the project, et cetera. So that hadn't really been part of the fabric of our activities in the first year, and we're now focusing, particularly in this first half of year two, on articulating that sustainability plan that will predict the needs for the project moving forward and align those with potential funding partners. There are some models out there that are working and that we're exploring. I mentioned our consultant, Stephen Ames from Bend. Bend has been working in this visioning space for a number of years and has a nifty current model for sustainability. And I'll just preface that by saying that project has had some kind of ups and downs in terms of its relative support and energy level. And I think we can learn from what didn't go so well there, for example, at some points. But I think the down was principally with the down in the economy, a few years ago. But their current setup is to have a kind of a leadership alliance, which are key employers and large organizations in the community that commit to an annual buy-in for the project. They have about a $400,000 project. I'm sorry, I'm not sure about the total cost of their project, but I think they have 8 funders that have agreed to come in on an annual basis and to provide a level of funding that will match 1/8 of the budget and enable them to exist. So I think that's an interesting model and one that we would certainly explore. I think one of the key things may be to focus on funding for specific implementation plan projects. We thought about this early on for the Vision Project per se, and to even access crowdfunding resources for bringing local money in to work on local projects. This is a growing interest nationwide, worldwide, and I think in particular we may be successful in energizing the community to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I want to contribute to that. And there may be a way to, just as those crowdfunding operations harness some facilities and administration costs to run the funding campaign, the Vision Project may want to help develop funding for specific projects that would then also feed back and support the visioning administrative structure. I mentioned providing project management. You guys know how important that is in the construction world. It's important for any project, and you also know you've got volunteers rolling, trying to make something happen. That project management that the project itself, the Vision Project, will provide is valuable, and I think that's something that we can articulate to our partners and, in a very amicable way, encourage support that is coming from funded projects as well. So we don't know yet is the short answer, but that's really in our plane of focus right now, and will be a very active activity, I think, particularly for Mike and Steve and I as we transition to an independent entity and a different structure for the project in this year.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that was helpful just for everybody to understand, and certainly the right steps are being taken. So, thank you.
Dave. Sure.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Dr. Buck, thanks, and thank you also. I'll echo what Justin said about your efforts and energies to this. What kind of markers has your group envisioned to measure the attainability of the goals? I mean, you talk about, like, say, job creation. Obviously we're drinking from a fire hose here. How many jobs are currently out there? How many jobs are going to be, I would guess, proactively created by the efforts of the vision? How are you going to measure that? Or how are you going to promote the process as it goes along?
Well, it's interesting that your appendix to that sentence, how are you going to promote it? I mean, we feel strongly that that moving forward, the progress from the project is going to be the important component of the communication that's heading out. So recognize that it's great to come up with all these ideas and plans, and ideas are worth exactly nothing. So now, what's the evidence that implementation is ongoing? And I think there's two components to the response. The first is that we've, with the data that we've collected, in especially the scientific data, we have some effective baseline data, as well as some, the second survey was at the end of the year, so a year one kind of update data set that gives us an idea of the relative buy-in of the community. We would take a similar approach in terms of measuring what's the impact of these projects. So, for example, we can, in the higher education arena, to provide, one of the action items is to provide more programs and more opportunities for the community to obtain post-secondary credentials. We know how many we generated last year. We know how many we're going to generate this year in the community, and we'll know how many come next year. And so, of course, that doesn't directly say, well, if we get the implementation plan action item going in that space and we see a bump, that it's all because of what we did. But I think the encouraging thing about these actions is that they're oriented around agreement in the community, and so there's a very positive face on each of those. And so we are anxious to team up to get to these goals. And so if we can create jobs with Jobs Plus, who's the lead partner on many of those job action items, and we can provide a bump up for Jobs Plus performance, then we'll claim it. And we'll track and articulate that as part of the activity of the vision. So I think in some cases it'll be more difficult than others. I will say that as we consolidated and distilled the community input to try to get specificity around these actions, there were times when we had to back off on some key words and components of the action that would really say, okay, well, you got this now, and you want to be there then, and that's easy to measure. And it's partly because partners got a little, hinky with it. It's the question about committing and how ambitious we want to be. So in some cases, there is admittedly some gray area. But again, that is the result of the process that brought the community to the table and invited them to weigh in on exactly what this plan says. So, so that's part of it, is data and data collection. And while we weren't all experts at this when we started a year ago, we've learned a lot about community data collection and interacting with the community, and that's going to be a huge asset moving forward. I think, in particular, the retaining the project manager with a focus on guiding the implementation forward, that's going to be one of the key priorities for that position. What's going on with that project? How many contacts? What's the timeline? Has that timeline been articulated? What's the first milestone? Have we got there? Not in the kind of taskmaster role, but in the benevolent supervisory role of, this is about, this project spun up from the vision, and so we're here to help you try to get there. And if we can provide some project management, we'll certainly do that. Of course, if you can on your own, if the lead partner is able to move that forward, which we anticipate in most cases, that's great. We'll just ask them to feed back. So we will have reporting, and we will be tracking.
Follow up to that.
Sure, Dave.
Downtown parking or traffic study was one of the deliverables you talked about. Do you envision, something like that is kind of at the forefront of our interest, because we're obviously trying to analyze the effect of the new parking layout with the park here, and also we're sitting on the concept or an idea of creating a parking structure 4th and Lakeside area. So is that something you would envision, maybe coming to a group like us and say, hey, would you guys be interested in participating in funding for that study? Because that's data we would really like to utilize as part of our going forward also.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the key aspects, is that we have been successful and very grateful to identify a lead partner for each of these action items. And part of the message to that partner is that we've also, in most cases, identified some supporting partners that in many cases may include Lcdc, for example. But our goal is to really empower that lead partner to assemble a team that's most likely going to get us to the goal line for that plan. And so that's a good example of a scenario where a lead partner, maybe the city in that case, would be interested in engaging with you and saying, hey, how can we do this together? And part of our effort for these actions moving forward is to help partners identify sources of funding to get them. Some of these are going to be expensive. There's going to be a lot of effort that has to be expended to achieve the funding from outside grants, from whatever source is available. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Thank you.
Deanna.
Dr. Buck, thank you for your energy and time you put into this. I know you've done most of it just because you love our community, and we appreciate it. You're asking us for about 1/4 of the funding that you're expecting to need. I'm wondering if we do grant this, if we could get some kind of an agreement where we would get quarterly updates. We really didn't hear anything other than what was in the paper, and maybe if we went onto the website last year and we did help assist in the funding. Well, communication's important, I think, and I think for this group particularly, communication is very important because of the dollars we're using. So I think if we do go forward with this, that's something I would really like to see done in a way that we can get this information so we know what's happening with what we're funding.
Yeah, it's an excellent suggestion. We have a draft communications plan that we've been working on in the last month and a half, and one section is communicating with funders. That's part of the structure that we've articulated. It's an excellent suggestion, and certainly we will be happy to do that.
Thank you.
At whatever frequency makes the most sense.
I think quarterly is a pretty good number.
Other questions of Dr. Buck? Well, I add my voice to the thanks. This is really a pretty incredible document here, and we've had some interesting studies in the city over the years, and some of those things have come to fruition, some haven't. But this involves a pretty in-depth identification of a whole lot of goals and objectives and action points, and sitting on the shelf, it probably, some of those might happen, but it's going to be haphazard. So, unless we kind of keep at the effort, I think some of the value of this could go away. So, just my thoughts. No other questions? Thank you, Will.
Thanks again, appreciate it.
It's the pleasure of the board. Deanna?
I would move for approval of a $25,000 funding of the 2030 Vision Project.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the request for $25,000 for the 2030 Vision project.
Want to include
Project
your
for Phase
quarterly
2 to happen
reporting?
in the next, basically the next
Yeah,
year.
perhaps,
Dave?
I think Dr. Buck alluded
just a
to.
second, Danny, maybe we should, Danielle suggested we put, along with that motion, the quarterly reporting.
If Deanna wants to include that, I think it should be in the motion.
Okay,
Second.
Accept that, okay.
okay.
Do that, good point.
I think Dr. Buck alluded to the fact that they're still formulating their budget type needs. They've come here asking for a commitment from us. I think we certainly want to do that. I don't know if we're a little bit premature on a dollar amount at this juncture. I want to make sure it's adequate. I want to make sure that that their scope of I guess their plan and their scope of existence for the next year as they go forward, that that it's, we hear about that plan after they've planned it and we make that decision rather than before. It's kind of like committing to buy an automobile before you've really seen the automobile come off the assembly line. I really think we need to hold off unless there's something from their perspective that they need a dollar hard and fast at this juncture. I think we can commit to doing it, but I think we should. 25,000 may not be enough. Is my only concern.
Mick,
What was the budgeted amount for 2012?
our initial contribution was
15,000 is our previous contribution. Are you talking about for the next fiscal year? What do we,
Previous year,
the previous year?
yeah.
15.
15? Okay.
Another comment, I mean, the way they've sort of couched the request, they've identified some specific items, so I think we want to decide, are we funding these 3 specific items, or are we just adding money to the overall budget? As you talk about this, Deanna.
I would suspect, I mean, my motion included these specific items, so maybe we should add that to the motion again. And the visioning project consultant for $18,000, communications and marketing consultant for $5,000, and marketing for $2,000. And Dave, I understand where you're coming from, but I also know that when you're out fundraising, you really, truly do need to kind of have a base and know what you've got there. And if for some reason they come up short, there's always the opportunity to come back.
The other point that raises in my mind then is if we fund these particular items, is that contingent upon their meeting their entire budget?
So do we want to add them to it or just leave it open?
I mean, in my mind, the best way to approach it is say, yes, we'll fund these, and with the understanding that you're going to meet the rest of your budget. So all these other items around it are built into the project, so that we don't end up just funding 3 pieces of it that don't get the work done because we don't have a coordinator, for instance.
I agree, Danny.
The other concern is, let's say you take the media component of that $5,000. There might be somebody in that business that wants to donate that in kind. Okay, they say, I'd really like to participate. That's in my wheelhouse. That makes sense to my resources, to what I feel like I can contribute. And then we said we're going to fund that. Then they've got somebody else who wants to do it as a funding mechanism. I hate to have them say, no, we can't take that. So I don't want to tie our hands and say, this is what we're going to do. This is all we're going to do. I'd kind of like to say that, I think that we're committed to fund, and I think we need to plug the holes that they aren't able to fundraise for.
I don't mind saying this is all we're going to fund for now. But I also don't want to micromanage their business. I'd rather say, this is what we're going to do for now. You guys can come back later and show us what you spent it on. We know they're going to be responsible. But just as you said, Dave, this thing will move and change. And I don't think I want them coming back and saying, you know what, we didn't spend $2,000 on marketing, we really did $1,000, and we need to spend $1,000 over here. That seems like we're asking for a bit much more than I would like. They can report back to us what they did, and we're about a fourth of their budget. So I would rather, just me, say, yep, we'll do the $25,000. We anticipate these are where you're going to spend the money. And with the quarterly reports, you can tell us what you have spent our money on.
And they have some authority to move money around line items.
I'm not uncomfortable with that at all.
I guess I look at it, if we're going to make a contribution of $25,000 to the project, what difference does it make what we pay for? I mean, it's not like we're specifically interested in a certain part of it. If we look at it and say, within our budget, we have $25,000 and we want to put towards this project, it really should be at their discretion of how it's going to be used, particularly if they've got to go out and fundraise for other portions of it. It doesn't make sense for us to, once again, micromanage it.
So it sounds like we're back to our original motion. So
Still second it.
motion being that we approve a $25,000 budget request.
With quarterly
Quarterly reporting. Is that our motion? Everybody concur?
Is quarterly reporting often enough? Do we think about it bi-monthly?
I think, Brad, projects like this move slowly at times. I think quarterly, that's every 4 months, or every 3 months.
Every 3 months.
I think it works just fine.
Okay.
Okay. More discussion? Question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and for everything you're doing. Keep up the good work. Okay, next item on the agenda is Property Acquisition Committee report. Commissioner Goodlander, we're going to talk a little bit about the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way property acquisition in conjunction with the City of Coeur d'Alene.
All right. Well, we've been presented with a great opportunity working with the city to acquire portions of the Burlington Northern right-of-way that's within our districts. And Tony has put together a PowerPoint that shows the actual boundaries and so on. So, Tony, do you want to show us that PowerPoint?
Sure. I'll relocate over to the podium here.
Sorry, oopsie. John, here.
There it is. I won't take credit for this PowerPoint presentation because I stole it from Mr. Gridley. So I appreciate him lending this PowerPoint that he used to present the issue to City Council. So with a little bit of background first, on July 15th, City Council authorized the purchase of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way for $2.5 million. The property was appraised in November of 2013 at $4.3 million. Burlington Northern has agreed to give the city 60 days until September 15th to negotiate the terms of a mutually acceptable purchase and sale agreement, and then try to close by the end of this calendar year or January 2015, with a 10% payment due when the purchase and sale agreement is completed. So with that background, City Council has agreed to this purchase price, subject to the city seeking LCDC partnership funding for the acquisition of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way property located within our lake and river districts. Should the LCDC agree to such an endeavor, then the city would raise the funds or commit the funds to acquire the remaining portions of the railroad right-of-way that exist outside LCDC. So, with all that said, let me use a graphic to explain what I just said. So, the purchase area that we're talking about for the railroad right-of-way starts here in Riverstone by this red line and goes all the way out to this red line, out by Hutter Road, the city of Hutter. What we're proposing tonight is that the LCDC acquire the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way between these two red lines in our river district and between these two red lines in our lake district. Then, if the board agrees with that, then the city would acquire this portion of the railroad right-of-way that is in the Mill River. in the Atlas Millside area. So basically, two portions to the deal. We have basically the tail ends of the right-of-way, and the city would come up with the funds for the interior part. So just to kind of give a little bit more background here, once again, this is kind of my depiction, kind of approximately where this area starts in Riverstone. So this would be the area that we would acquire from Burlington Northern, that part of the railroad right-of-way. This is kind of where the BLM, Bureau of Land Management lease area starts, where the railroad did not own that right-of-way in fee simple title. They leased it from the federal government, so thus the BLM controls that part. So we would acquire the railroad right-of-way behind Belle Reve, just to the south of the Riverstone Park, just to the south of the Whitewater Creek Affordable Housing Project, to right about there. And then it starts entering the Atlas Mill site where the city would pick up ownership. So the city would pick up ownership from here, kind of go all the way through the Atlas Mill site. We're still going through the Atlas Mill site. And I don't know, okay. So that's the area that the city would acquire. And then this is some depictions, some graphics of what the area looks like in the Mill River area, as we heard earlier from our Mill River friend, the Homeowners Association. This is the area between the Johnson City Park and existing housing that is out at Mill River. This is a shot of Johnson Park and Mill River. Another shot. Another shot. And then this is the area behind U.S. Bank and the homes along the river there. So that's kind of a graphic overview of the issue at hand. Now we can kind of go to another phase of the conversation. So meeting with the Property Acquisition Committee, we tried to come up with a way to value Lcdc's participation in this endeavor. And what we came up with is captured on this spreadsheet. Since the city has agreed to go ahead and acquire the Atlas Mill site area, if Lcdc agrees to acquire the area in the Lake District and the River District, we approached it saying that since it's all going to be public money, let's just take the asking price of $2.5 million divided by the total square footage contained in the railroad right-of-way and come up with an average cost per square foot that the two entities, the city and Lcdc, would use to calculate their proponent shares of the acquisition. So there's 847,090 square feet according to the Val Bridge appraisals that were done in 2013. LCDC has 502,740. So if you look at the top part of that spreadsheet, you see the purple numbers. It works out to LCDC contributing $1,483,727 to this endeavor, which would require the Lake District coming up with $728,193 and the River District coming up with $755,534. So once again, that's just based on a square footage price of $2.95. You take $2.5 million divided by the total square footage of the right-of-way, it equals $2.95 a square foot. You take that times the square footage within our districts, and that's how we came up with what we would propose contributing to this acquisition. I would then, if the board would agree to that analytical procedure, I would recommend that we kind of round up those values a bit to cover acquisition costs, closing costs, title costs, and things like that. So my recommendation to the board, if you're agreeable, is that I would say that we budget for the Lake District $750,000 and for the River District $775,000. I think that would be sufficient funds to capture the required cost, legal closing, title work that would be required.
Also, the acquisition company met and looked at this project and obviously see it as a great opportunity for our city. So the recommendation of the acquisition committee was to move forward with the project and the funding of the project.
Questions of Deanna?
Yeah, Deanna, a question on the property. Once we acquire the two tail ends and the city does the center portion, do we anticipate at some point in time LCDC is going to deed the property to the city? And if that is the path, how soon might that happen?
You know, I think I'm going to ask Mr. Gridley that question. Mike, why don't you come up and give us a rundown?
As he's coming up, that would be part of the Four Corners study
It
that's
is part of the Four
just
Corners
kicking
study.
off here, so that would inform us, I think, what would happen there. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for having me. I think one of the exciting things is this opportunity to look at this. I think it is something that is going to require master planning. We are doing the Four Corners project, and that's got a lot of public space, obviously, and a lot of opportunity. Speaking a little bit, going back to Dave's comment or question to Charles about how do we measure in some of these projects, one of the things that came clear through our survey work in 2030 was the community values access to the water. One of the specific items was to buy railroad right-of-way, and so I think some of these things we're doing now or considering are things that we're fairly confident about based on our survey that the community wants and they want to see happen. And so this is that. Having said that, it's this big opportunity and puzzle to figure out what's this going to be. It's our last waterfront in the community. It gives our connection to the west, trail connection. It could be something really special that would promote both community access, community use, and also great development for private development and recruiting of business. So long answer to, I don't know exactly how the path goes forward. I think it requires planning. It'll require partnership and both private and public to decide what are we going to do with this. The developers that we've talked to, I think, are warming to the idea that maybe they can benefit in their development from having great public space, that makes their private development more valuable, which makes it more valuable from a property tax point of view. That's kind of something that is a little different than the approach a lot of folks have had coming in, and the private developers want to develop the waterfront. That's their goal. That's as far as their vision is. Like I said, in our discussions with folks, they're starting to realize that, well, the community wants access, the community wants views and vistas. If you enable us to do that or partner with us to do that, plan with us to do that, you can be successful too. So we've had some good discussions. I think it's a great opportunity for the community to do something special in conjunction with what you're already looking at with BLM. So that's my speech for. So the answer is I don't know, really.
I think the opportunity is enormous. When we look at that picture that shows a trail along behind the U.S. Bank, and you see a trail and a fence and housing, and because of this opportunity to acquire this and make it public, it's very likely will not be, well, it won't be, because we have control. It won't be a bunch of houses on the river and then a trail just behind a fence. So this is an opportunity that is unparalleled. It really is. I think everybody agrees, so I don't have to sell anything.
Yeah, it's a great piece of property.
It's been Mike's dream for a long time.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Dave.
So under this proposal, thus buying basically the bookends, we'll have separate land deeds to those two parcels, and then the city will have the deed for the stuff in between.
Correct. The fee
Okay.
title would go to our agency for that which we purchase and to the city for that which they purchase.
And
That ensures that we have a little participation in how this all plays out.
yeah, we need to control some property that'll help us do that. So the right-of-way, Deanna, goes all the way down to the water, correct?
Mike.
No, it does not, and that's one of the interesting issues, if I can use your map again. So the right-of-way is approximately 60 feet wide through most of it. It widens in a couple places, but basically 60 feet wide. Right here, it is not, actually none of it is on the waterfront. However, what makes it a great opportunity for partnership and compromise and work with the adjoining landowners is they really can't develop their property without the use of this. like I said, the most recent conversations I've had with them is they are starting to, or haven't made a formal proposal, but they are looking at saying, well, city, we'll give you the waterfront if you'll give us an equivalent amount of space inland, which is significant because otherwise we can't really get to the waterfront. So it's set up for a partnership on this land here. I think the proposal, it's been annexed. The proposal is to do more multifamily or do more denser, but they would give or donate the waterfront to the city. So the existing right-of-way, none of it actually touches the water. It gets pretty close. But by owning it and controlling it, we are able to then work with the developers to create waterfront access, basically. That makes sense.
Dave?
I think some of the pictures show there, I think, what we don't want it to be. And we've got some examples started out there that this existing right-of-way, goes between housing developments, and so basically it's a 60-foot path between two private property. It's a corridor, and I think what the public envisions is this is going to open up and be unrestricted views and have access to the river. So the negotiating part of this is going to be the key to this whole deal, because I don't think anybody wants to spend this kind of money just to have a pathway between two fence lines.
Yeah.
I think we want to spend this kind of money so we control the access to the river before it gets to the fact where the developments come in and say, well, I got to develop that waterfront so to make my project pencil out. So I think that it's very critical that that be known going in, that the public, we're really not buying riverfront here.
Yeah, that's why.
The only way we're going to get water access is to negotiate with the private property guys that do own the riverfront. And that is going to be a critical component to this. And I think that the visioning of that is going to be really where the public is going to come out in the future, like Mike talks about, doing some swaps and some trades and that sort of thing. And we can get involved a little bit, but kind of on both ends, we're kind of pretty well defined as to what can happen. But that hashed area that the city is going to be involved with is the key part of negotiating. Some of it still, I think, Mike, has to be annexed in the city. Others already a done deal. I mean, it's pretty much set as to what will happen to be modified. But I think that's the key component for the city leadership is to be able to negotiate that, you might say, unrestricted access, or being able to get the public off of this trail access system to the waterfront.
And again, I've obviously been involved in 2030, but one of the valuable things was it was a big research survey project to find out what the community wants. And because we know very strongly that the community supports this, our policymakers, our city council, and folks like you know that and are going to take steps towards that. Likewise, we're able to go to the developers and say, guys, here's the reality. You're going to have to go through public hearing processes to get your planning and zoning approval and all that. Here's what people want. Here's what our community wants. You're going to hear that. So why not work with us now to partner on something successful for you and the community rather than get down the road and get into something that doesn't work out. They're getting that message and understanding it, and I feel like we are going to be able to do some good things out there. So,
Dave and the committee, if we acquire the property, the risk is we may sit on it for a while while we're trying to negotiate and get things figured out. That's a risk. And then you're hopeful that we will cooperate with the developers and them with us, and we'll end up with some property that's public space right down to the river.
yeah, I
But
think
not the entire parcel, I would guess. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Pretty hard to have the entire
It'd be
parcel
a huge
down.
parcel that would be
Yeah, we'd
hard for
never
the
get
city
it
to
all.
Well, it'd
maintain.
be a
and-
significant amount.
Yeah, okay. I think I understand it better. Thank you.
And I would say the needle's moving towards more significant public access because, again, I think the folks looking at the development are starting to rethink how they're doing. They're starting to look at developments like Kendall Yards in Spokane that has the trail on the waterfront or the view, and that creates value for every other lot in that development. It's worth more than if it's just blocked off. So it's a change of thinking of what we've had, but I think people are warming up. So I have a level of confidence that that will happen.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Nick?
So, Mike, the Four Corners project goes how far west? Does it go all the way to Hutter?
So the Four Corners project, as I understand it, is somewhat ill-defined. It doesn't really show totally on this map, but it goes so here we are at the US 95 bridge. It would go all the way down to the Four Corners, the City Park, Government Way.
But how far west will it go?
And how far west it goes is somewhat ill-defined too, because as I understand it, and I can be corrected because I haven't been directly involved in the contracting with Welch-Comer, but Welch-Comer has been hired to do by the city to do master plan. I think LCDC's been a partner in that. I think when that was being discussed, people said, well, gosh, if we're looking at the Four Corners, that actually connects, the foot bone's connected to the leg bone, and let's take a look at this. I don't think that's been formalized beyond just include up to, I want to say, in this vicinity that I'm...
Tony, you probably know the answer.
I do know the answer.
Okay.
I was enjoying watching Mike squirm.
The tap dance.
Yeah. Mr. Patrick and I have been involved with this, but the current contract, if you could look at the screen, calls for the Four Corners planning effort to kind of end right about here, where the BLM ownership ends.
We didn't know anything.
But there is some energy to have the planning team look at a certain level of planning, starting from the BLM area all the way out to the City of Hutter. So to answer Commissioner Arman, yes, there is some energy to have the planning team that is in place right now to look at possibilities on the planning front for that area. Whether their contract is amended to reflect that is still fluid.
So I might add, we've had a couple meetings last week with representatives of the owner of this property and those two properties. We had Phil Boyd and Dell Hatch from Welch-Comer attended those. I think it's important, or the way, and there's some citizens here today, the approach we've had is to daylight this as much as possible. The community needs to know as much as possible what's going on. We want to hear as much as possible about what's their vision, what do they want to do with this corridor. And so I think many of us feel like there ought to be master planning going on that connects all this. That's going to make it a national or international type project. So rather than piecemealing it, I think that's the opportunity we have now, because this is still a blank slate in the middle, and those folks are going to want to participate in something nice. So,
Nice throw in something.
Don't normally do that, Chet, but if you can be real quick.
Okay. I'm also on an ad hoc committee that the council formed to advise them on this, and we've just come out with what we're going to advise them on. We've started the process. We hope to get to council in 2 weeks. And just to comment on something you said, you don't envision all of the waterfront. Well, we did. We actually envisioned, by owning the railroad right-of-way up through here, let's talk mostly this property, and with the city's 40-foot shoreline protection ordinance, basically the city would have control of the waterfront all along that area. And we would envision taking that control and finding partners, maybe the LCDC, maybe private funds, to actually purchase that property between the right-of-way and the river. So there are lots of different things. There's lots of different ways to skin the cat. That may be thinking bigger than negotiating with landowners for, gosh, access here and access there, and you can put a house there. We took the 2030 vision of access seriously, and we think we should have access and riverfront the whole way. Up into the next piece of property right now, they're talking about swapping, as Mike said, 100 feet of waterfront for the access, and we think that's terrific. So that will be the recommendation that our committee is going to be providing to council.
Thank you for that. Okay, other questions of Mike? Brad?
I have a question on Mike. I just tell you, from my standpoint on the acquisition committee, I think it would be great if we get all waterfront, but we don't know. I think even if we got no waterfront, although this is expensive, it stands alone just as a public access for the trail. But I think we're going to get a lot of waterfront with this. And I think all of us recognize the last couple of decades we've been in a unique position in the city's history where there's been some painful changes with natural resource-based industries closing and things happening, but there's been a lot of key acquisitions this city's made in the last couple of decades that people are going to be feeling 100 years from now. And if we don't do this now, it's now or never. And I don't know how this will turn out, but I just know that having control of that land brings us to the table. And maybe we'll get all the waterfront, maybe we won't get all of it, but it brings us to the table. And I know we're going to get some of it because some of that land is almost impossible to develop because there's such a narrow strip between the right-of-way and the waterfront. So we'll have to be at the table on some of that. So, you know, I remember 40 years ago when the city was trying to buy the other half of Tubbs Hill, and as natural as that looks now, that was really tenuous. That could have tipped either way, trying to find the funding to do that, and it looks like a no-brainer now. And so this will look the same way in a few years. So I think it's worth the money. This is the only chance there'll be at it. So it's a no-brainer for me on the acquisition committee.
I would echo that. One thing in particular you said, which is, it's once this property, if we don't buy this now, it's gone forever. This opportunity for public access is gone forever, basically. And it is a bargain price. Scott?
Mr. Chairman, has the Finance Committee looked at these dollars? The amount that we're proposing?
Yes, we discussed it.
Then I'd like to make a motion that we do it.
Second it.
Right, it's just what the chairman just said. It's a great vision. It's exactly what a lot of the community wants to do, and we need to buy it.
Moved and seconded to approve the initiative to purchase the two ends of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad right-of-way for, what's your total purchase price now?
It's $1,525,000.
$1,525,000, $750,000 coming from the Lake District for acquisition of that portion in the Lake District, and $775,000 for that portion in the River District from the River District.
And the only other thing that our legal counsel would suggest is that we put in here, subject to yet to be crafted purchase and sale agreement.
Subject to an approved purchase and sale agreement.
We intend to bring back
I'll
next month.
second that
Okay.
motion. I'll approve
You guys
that.
good with those words? Do you have that down, Tony?
I do.
Discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
And we'll report back.
Yes, thank you. We'll look for a contract next month. Okay, so that takes us to our annual budgeting exercise for our fiscal year 2015. So what we do here is have a public hearing, so I'm going to open the floor to any public comments in the context of this public hearing. So do we have anybody in the audience that wishes to testify on the budget? No? Okay, then Tony, why don't you give us a little rundown? I should have done that first anyway, but give us a rundown.
It's okay. As Chairman Davis said, I'll kind of give an overview of the budget that we presented last month, the draft budget. And with one minor modification now based on the board's recent action of increasing the capital expenditure line item in the River District to $775,000. So with that said, just a brief overview of the fiscal year 2015 budget. In the Lake District, we are estimating we're going to have a beginning fund balance of $2.2 million. We anticipate revenues of $6 million. We anticipate expenditures of $6.3 million and with an ending fund balance of $1.9 million. So a little bit more detail on the Lake District. Of that $6 million of revenues, we're estimating $4.3 million in tax increment revenues from the Lake District and a $1.25 million bond draw on the Washington Trust bond for the Lake District. In the River District, we are estimating a beginning fund balance of about $4.1 million, estimated revenues of $1.9 million, estimated expenditures of $1.9 million, with an estimated fund balance at 9/30/2015 of $4.1 million. So a little bit more detail for the River District. We're expecting an estimated tax increment revenue of $1.9 million. And the biggest expenditure that we just modified would be increasing the capital expenditure in the River District from $400,000 in acquisition to $775,000. That would cover the land acquisition as well as closing costs. A few other items of interest for the budget, and I'll be probably repeating myself from what I said last month, but just so we have it in our mind. In the estimation of revenues, I'm using 2013 levy rates because that's what we have to use right now. The 2014 hasn't been set yet. It happens this fall. We have, in the Lake District, we're experiencing a $20.7 million property valuation increase over last year. In the River District, we're experiencing a $16.3 million increase in property valuation. That equates into the little bit larger property tax revenues that we anticipate receiving. I mentioned the $1.25 million bond draw on the Washington Trust Bank line of credit. Our expenses, just to remind you, of the public art, 2% of our tax increment revenue transferred to the city for future public art projects located within the districts. For this coming fiscal year, that's $86,000 for the Lake District and about $40,000 for the River District. We have expenses in here that covers our professional contract services for accounting, legal counsel, external audit, community relations, and government relations. We have planning funds in here we have funds in our Lake District for $90,000 for the Four Corners project that we just discussed, as well as in the River District we have $250,000 planned for potential engineering for the Southeast Way roadway improvement. We have special project reserves set up for both districts to cover costs that we envision may occur so that the board can draw on those funds if necessary. For example, in the Lake District, we have funds in there for the potential demolition of the 712 and 722 Young Avenue properties should the initiative with the Innovative Collective go forward. So we have some pre-planning funds available for that. In our Lake District, as per our agreement with Washington Trust Bank, we have a $2,080,000 annual bond payment as an expense item. And we have an event grant for the Downtown Association, total of $43,750. So those are some of the highlights. Be happy to chat with you, the board, about any item in particular, but it has not changed from last month's conversation other than increasing the River District capital expenditure line item that the board just did.
Questions of Tony?
Tony, I have one question. Once we take the $1.25 million drawdown on the Washington Trust line of credit, what will that leave remaining for potential future line of credit drawdowns?
Maybe if Danielle will join me on this answer, but looking at the time frame associated with that $16.7 million bond, Danielle's recommendation is that this will be our final draw on that due to the time that elapsed from kicking that bond off. I think we have 3 years. Is that correct?
Well, you have to reasonably expect to expend the proceeds within 3 years. So we're right at that 3-year threshold with this last draw. I believe you did reasonably expect to expend the proceeds within 3 years when we issued the bonds in 2011. But if you were to the IRS were to come in and do an audit, hindsight is 20/20, and I think that my recommendation is for you not to put yourself in a position where you're expending past that 3-year mark to protect yourself in an audit situation.
So basically, to answer your question, Mick, we're utilizing the majority of the 16.7, but we're leaving about $800,000 unused.
You could always seek to borrow, assuming a bank would allow you to creditworthiness, once they assessed your credit to borrow, you could seek to borrow again, and you'd start that 3-year clock over again.
Other questions of Tony? Yeah, good point. If seeing no other discussion, we need to adopt a resolution. Do you need to read any of that, Tony?
I'll
Title
just
or
read
anything?
the title of the resolution. Resolution number 1402, a resolution of the Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Agency doing business as Lake City Development Corporation, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, accepting and approving the following budget for fiscal year 2015 per listed estimated expenditures by account title and listed estimated revenues by income source.
Okay, roll call.
Goodlander.
Yes.
Hassel.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Davis.
Aye.
Caldwell.
Aye.
Hoskins.
Aye.
Gruffel.
Aye.
Hatzer.
Aye.
Armin.
Yes.
Who has it, the yeses or the ayes?
I just say they're all yeses, so I don't do the ayes.
Motion carries.
Did we have a motion? I didn't catch, I missed it. Who motioned?
Oh, well, I assumed that.
Resolution
your-
is approved.
Yeah, your resolution is approved, since
Okay.
we called the roll call.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
In the past, we've had a motion to approve Resolution
Move to
1402.
approve Resolution
There you go.
1402 as
Second.
Now, we're better.
Moved and seconded, and then without objection, the roll call previously taken will apply to this motion.
No objection. No objection. No objection.
All right. Committee reports. Finance Committee, Commissioner Caldwell.
Yeah, the Finance Committee, maybe before we get into the reports, just to remind the committee on the budget that Tony put together. He does a really good job of laying everything out for the Finance Committee, and we go through that budget with him, and then we ask him lots of questions. So the budget that he amended and he's worked on, it's very detailed, and he does a good job of that, so we do spend quite a bit of time going through the budget. And the nice thing is, if you look back at our budget, especially on the income side, compared with what we actually got, we're really pretty darn close. Try to be a little bit conservative, but we're fairly close. So, having said that, let's go ahead and look at the financials for July. And we'll start with the balance sheet of the Lake District. The Lake District did have an increase in cash, primarily due to the fact that we received the biannual county increment check from taxes. And during the month, we received a large check, and then we also had a $1,040,000 Washington Trust bond payment that we had thought was going to be due in July, but it's actually early August. So we're making that payment, but just to tell you, there's a little bit of difference there. And then during the month, on the asset side, significant changes were the ice plant IRA that had a principal reduction of $16,584 based on payments. The chamber DDA had a principal reduction of $1,452, and there was no change on the Sherman Lofts IRA. Our mortgages and balances on notes payable decreased $15,389. That's pretty typical for the decrease we have each month based on our payments that we make. And then, as Tony had mentioned, there is a amount that we set aside for the due to the arts, 2% for that. If you look at the profit and loss numbers for the Lake District, that's where you'll see the large amount of income we received on property taxes of $1,430,920. We had rent income of $12,152, interest income of $142, for a total revenue during the month of $1,443,214. If you go down and look at some of the significant expenses we had during the month, tax and increment payments, line item down 2/3 of the way, $18,036. That represents the principal payments that we discussed for the chamber and the ice plant, and that totaled $18,036. We had an interest expense line item of $6,473, and everything else was in line with what we typically have in that district. One of the questions we asked Tony is the payment that we received of $1,430,920. How does that compare with what we had thought we would get? Very close. Usually it's between 96% and sometimes we're about 104% above what we thought. Depends on how you look at it, because there's some money that comes in later from delinquent taxes and penalties and fees, but really close to what we thought. And I think the budgeting process that we're doing works, and it's reflective in that. But that's always the part that you kind of go, well, I hope it all works out the way we think it will, and it should, but until you have the check, you don't know for sure. So if we could go on to the River District, we'll start with a balance sheet on the River District. And in the River District, we did have an increase in cash, again, as a result of the tax payment. We have an increase of $441,717. As it relates to some of the projects that we have in the River District, there was no change in Riverstone West, Phase 1, Phase 2, Mill River Seniors, and Riverstone West Apartments, because there was no principal payment reduction on those notes. If you go to the profit and loss statement, that's where you'll see that we did receive a check for $586,490. You combine that with our interest income of $239 for a total revenue of $586,729. On the interest expense line item, which is towards the very bottom, 2/3 of the way down the page, you'll see in line item $138,196. That represents significant interest payments that we made on projects in the district, with the biggest one being Riverstone West, $451,451, Riverstone West, $3,929, Mill River, $6,541, and Riverstone West Apartments, $6,276. So that's the major activity in that district. And as you can see, both of them did receive large payments this last month from the property tax revenue. Any further questions on either district? If not, we'll move to the payables. I believe Tony's just passed out the most recent payable sheet. As you can see, the payables as far as total dollar amount is significantly lower than it's been the last several months, because we're no longer funding McEwen, which is a completed project. We start with Elam and Burke, a small amount of $37. Holly Troxel for their work during the month of $1,206. Molitor Associates, that's our government relations in Boise, $1,863.37. And then City of Coeur d'Alene Downtown Sidewalk Initiative, we have a $70,000 cap we have spent, and have a payable here for $35,202.57. And Tony, I can't recall how many sidewalks that was. Do you remember how many ramps that was?
Yes, so as you recall, the board agreed to commit $70,000 over 2 fiscal years for this ADA compliance initiative, and this billing, $35,000 equates to 15 sidewalk intersections that have been completed on Sherman and Lakeside. So they have more to do. These apparently were the most expensive ones, so they think they can get the remaining sidewalk intersections done next year and still hit our $70,000 cap. They don't expect to come back asking for further funds.
Yep. So, any questions on the payables?
I move to approve.
So to approve, was there a second there? And I assume that includes the financial reports. Motion to approve the financials and the payables. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have on the financial report.
You're right. Housing Committee, Commissioner Goodlander.
At present, the Midtown project, the housing company is still working on it. We've not received any updates, so there were kind of nothing really major on the housing committee. So, quiet report.
Okay, any questions of Deanna? Seeing none, Parking Committee, Commissioner Jordan.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything new to report on parking. Parking Commission didn't have a August meeting because there was no agenda items, so the chairman elected not to have one, so I really don't have any new updates.
Okay, thank you for that. Communications Committee, Commissioner Patzer.
Mr. Chair, just a couple quick things from our group. I think Tony and Tree have put together the electronic newsletter, I believe, that was forecast to hit the streets late this afternoon, so it's probably in your inboxes as we speak. The second thing is Communication Committee met again with the Range organization to further develop and talk about their suggested initiatives. And I'll tell you that the Communication Committee will be getting an email for some further input along those lines here within the next week. So, guys, look for that in your mailbox, and please give us your feedback as quick as possible. So, that's all I've got, Mr. Chair.
Any questions of Dave? Thank you for that, Dave. Jobs Committee, Commissioner Arman.
We did not have a meeting this last month, so I do not have an update.
Summer strikes. Thank you for that. Executive Director's Report, Tony.
Just two items, Mr. Chairman. Update on the 518 North Park Drive demolition. They are planning to move equipment in tomorrow. So they will take that building down tomorrow and probably be pretty much buttoned up by Friday afternoon. So that's underway. And the other initiative is a four-corner project update, and I'll ask Mr. Patcher to help me with this, but the team, the Westcomer planning team has met, and they've are already underway with conceptuals and ideation, and they had a tour here this Monday.
Yeah, right away was walked.
Mm-hmm. And I was unable to attend that tour. Dave, were you on that tour?
No, I was not. I've walked it before at Parks.
But they took the team and other stakeholders from four corners of Independence Point parking lot all the way out to at least Riverstone. I'm not sure if they went any further than that or not. But
They even walked some of the right-of-way that we agreed to help on tonight. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. There's a lot of energy from city leadership to expand this project all the way to Hutter. And I think everybody agrees that is certainly in the best interest of the entire citizenry to do that, because this is a one-shot deal, as you all have brought up earlier tonight. So that process continues to march along, trying to get to the end game in January. But the month of September we'll be busy with the start of the public gatherings to solicit input on what they've been working on. So look forward to that.
Great. Questions of Tony or Dave on that? Anything else?
that's all I have.
Okay, Board Commissioner comments.
Just one question, maybe that Tony would know the answer. On the McEwen Park, where they had the water situation and they did some things to fix that, is that pretty well taken care of on the end down by the Harbor House?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. The city leadership, city engineering, and all the technical expertise with Welch-Comer and the other planning consultants were thrown heavy at that to come up with a solution, and I've been told they have. They've fixed it, and I think if you go down there, you'll see it's been remediated. And when I was told that they, from some of their initial sampling, that they underestimated, or some of their samples missed a clay layer that was there that was affecting the permeability of that part of the field. And they became aware of that very quickly, and they took care of it with some additional engineering.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
I walked down there one day when they were working on it, and they had mobilized a lot of people and equipment, both the city and I think maybe the contractor or the engineering firm was down there. They worked pretty hard at it.
And some of the impetus for the solution was that they started calling it the Boyd Pond after Phil Boyd at Welch Engineering. He did not care for that, so he moved the
That's
fix it.
taken care of. Good.
Okay. Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none, public comments. Okay. No public comments. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Move a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.